wide beach stretching from one side of your view to another. Sometimes it's hard to read the past unless you go back across the sands of time, treading over what markings have been left in them. Of course, it's equally true of the future, and we all slowly draw our lines upon that side of the beach. Like I say, history is a beach, and a rather troublesome one at that. However, there are tales you do not always hear from history. Tales that are lost to all who were not there. Tales that were washed away on the waves of memory, never to be read upon the sands of time. Wouldn't it be nice if someone could tell some of those stories? Perhaps someone could somehow save a few. Know them, tell them, perhaps. And perhaps, yes, I think I can trust you enough to hear such tales, to listen to them and picture what was once written on the beach of history. You might laugh at them. That's a risk. Might dismiss them as nonsense, ramblings from a madman. But maybe you'll accept my tales and remember them. Then those tales will still have a slight little indentation in the beach of history. Yes, I have many tales, many tales. But for now, though, I think perhaps the tale of blood. The tale of blood. The blood dripped over the edge of the altar. Drip, drip, drip. Drip after drip, landing on the stones of the temple and pooling in the edges. Tlatoxel stared at the pool, licking his lips slightly. Great God of the sun and warriors, I, Tlatoxel, am thankful for your return of light in the sky. The blood has been spilt in your honor, and we serve you with our perfect sacrifice, he bellowed. And the crowd, cheering, raised their hands skyward. Tlatoxel grinned. Then he turned from the crowd and stepped back towards the temple. With Tonila, he scurried inwards and to the wall, the great wall of inscriptions, where the passing of the high priest Yetaxa was described. Around the sign of the coiled serpent, furrowing his brow, he turned to Tonila, the great goddess, and her friends. They have returned into the tomb of Yetaxa, the real Yetaxa. I want man here to guard this spot forevermore. But Platoxel, they're gone, trapped within the walls again, Tonila lightly suggested. Normally he would not be intimidated by another, especially not Platoxel. But there was something about the look in Platoxel's eyes, something he did not recognize. Were it not that Platoxel had never proclaimed himself as any sign of the gods, Tonila would have been convinced in that moment that he was. Was it rage in those eyes? Power? He didn't know. Tonila, you are high priest of knowledge now, are you not? I have decreed you as such, no? Yes, Platoxel. Then you should not be so foolish. The false goddess and her friends. They came out of the tomb when they first presented themselves. There must be something, some way in which the tomb can be accessed. The secrets of Ixta's father. That is how they have deceived, and they may yet use those secrets to escape Tonila. Tonila nodded, understanding now. Platoxel leant in, his words dropping into a quieter, calmer form. You must show yourself to be wise, Tonila, or else there shall be no place for you. High priest of knowledge cannot be without knowledge. Tonila nodded again, and went to fetch someone for guarding the wall of inscriptions. As he left, Platoxel turned back to the wall and stared, glaring at it, at the sign of Yetaxa, the sign that had caused all of this. In his head he cursed Otlock. The man had always been so blind to such things. He had once hinted to Tlatoxel that he felt the sacrifices were not the best way to follow the gods. Ridiculous. What did he know? Ortlock and his knowledge. It had led to silly notions and detestable beliefs. And the false goddess, with this sign and with Ortlock's horrible, twisted ideas, had deceived Lord Ortlock and turned those beliefs ever further away from their gods, from his sacrifices. Who else would dare to try and remove him from his rightful duty? The arrogance of the false goddess and her servants. It angered him greatly. The man arrived, sent by Tonila, and Tlatoxel mused that either way, it did not matter now. The false goddess and her servants were within the tomb, and he would not allow them to escape. He turned and left the temple, feeling that it was time to go amongst the people, to receive the praise deserving of his work. As Tlatoxel passed the altar, though, he stopped. Looking down at the pool of blood on the stones, he kneeled, dipped his fingers into the blood, and drew them across his face. Freshly repainting his markings, he then stood and made his way down the temple steps. Blood led the way, as it always did, as he always knew it would. It was some little time after this that Tlatoxel asked for a guard to be posted in the Garden of Peace. Tonila noted over the following days that more and more guards were being posted around it. Why, he could not figure out. He searched high and low for Tlatoxel, but could not seek him out. Not until one guard pointed him at the peak of the temple. The guard uttered 5 words. The gods are in him. Tonila was taken aback. Tlatoxel was no god. Tlatoxel was high priest of sacrifice, but never a god. He fought to question the statement with God, but he decided he'd already wasted enough time. He hurried up the steps and to the peak, hurried past the altar and in towards the wall. He stopped, taken aback again, this time by the sight in front of him. Tlatoxel at the wall with several guards tearing the sign of Ataxa out of the wall. Tlatoxel, what is the meaning of this? Tlatoxel turned to him, looking him up and down, moving away from the wall and leaving the guards to continue their work. As he approached, Tonila felt the dread from a few days ago return. Tlatoxel's eyes looked frozen in place, almost bulging from their places. Don't you see, Tonila? The false goddess means to escape, but we can stop her. She does not leave, so we must make her leave. Tonila started to form a response on his lips, but he was cut short by what Tlatoxel said next. The sign is hers, so we must break the sign, tear it from place, and take her out. She is a false goddess, and I will see her destroyed. Tonila, we must see it ended. I command it. This was beyond belief, Tonila thought to himself. Did Tlatoxel really think this? Was he saying what Tonila felt he was saying? Tonila was beginning to worry that perhaps this was the sort of matter in which Ortlock would have been better suited. But Ortlock was gone. He had abandoned their ways to die somewhere in the distance. But now Tlatoxel seemed ready to abandon them too. Tlatoxel was prepared to destroy Ataxa's memory, her being, her sign, her honor. False goddess or no false goddess, he had always believed in what the Ataxa had been before this apparent reincarnation, in how the fabled high priest had channeled the spirit and the work of the gods until they were one and the same. And so Tonila straightened himself up and replied, "You command, Tlatoxel? You command? I think you forget that I am the high priest of knowledge." Tonila, started Tlatoxel, frustration apparent in his voice, but Tonila held firm, continuing, "And I know that this is not right. You mustn't destroy the sign. To do so is disrespect upon the gods and upon Yetaxa." Tlatoxel huffed. "Disrespect. There can be no such thing for a false one. I see it now, and I hear it now. For in front of this wall and this sign for many of the past days, Tornila, I know it. Know what? Tlatoxel grinned, his frozen eyes appearing to light on fire, bulging ever further in their sockets. I am the gods, Tornila. I am the gods, and I demand sacrifice. I demand blood, and I demand that these other gods be stricken from the land. Tornila's jaw dropped, and it was then that Tlatoxel stepped ever closer to him. Does that not meet your approval, Tornila? Do you not believe? Do you wish to denounce me? Tornila had no words for him. He started to back away. The guards, tearing the sign from the wall, turned their heads to watch. Tornila was appalled, utterly and truly appalled. What horror was this man? To declare himself master of life and dead, to set himself up above everyone else as God. And in that moment, a thought came into Tornila's head. Sadly, many, many years too late. Perhaps he had been wrong all his life. Perhaps they all had been. Perhaps all they had done was not the bidding of the gods. Perhaps there had never been any gods at all. Tornila, at last, had knowledge. Tlatoxel jumped at Tornila, taking him by surprise. Winded Tornila stumbled back out of the room. Guards watched silently as Tlatoxel gave pursuit. Tornila steadied himself as Tlatoxel pulled out his dagger, and the intent became immediately clear to Tornila, and he knew now what it was that he saw in Tlatoxel's eyes. It was not rage, not anger, but madness. Tornila made to run, but all in vain. Tlatoxel grappled with him, and though Tornila was almost able to shake the smaller man off, he felt the edge of the dagger scratching across his arms. And then Tlatoxel stabbed the dagger into his leg. Shaken by the pain, Tornila let out a cry, released his grip on Tlatoxel. Seeing his moment, Tlatoxel grabbed him, shoved him, and dragged him onto the altar. Tornila had just enough time to look up at Tlatoxel one final time. Tlatoxel brought the dagger down. Tornila went limp. Blood dripped over the edges of the altar and onto the stones. Drip, drip, drip. Tlatoxel, with a large grin plastered across his face, removed the dagger from Tornila's body. An unbeliever purged, thought Tlatoxel. One of my enemies vanquished. He turned and walked back to the wall. The guards, seeing his bloody dagger, cheered wildly. The sign of Litaxa had finally been torn free from the wall in his absence, and yet another enemy gone, Tlatoxel thought. Whether the Ataxa had been a man or a woman or whatever else, he was free of it. Tlatoxel stepped into the gap in the wall, into the tomb, observing the room empty, save for a single body and an all-too-familiar bracelet. Tlatoxel thought to himself, but many more enemies to go. Oh yes, yes, he could see now. He was a true god, and he would destroy them. He would be the destruction of them all. And that is the tale of blood. And Tlatoxel was right about one thing in his madness. He would indeed be the destruction of them all.